Hi, in today's lesson we're looking at how to improve your speaking and writing with linking words and expressions to compare and contrast ideas. This is so important for all of you taking exams, whether it's IELTS or TOEFL or Cambridge. Contrasting ideas is a great way to raise the level of your English. I will give you the expressions and show you how they work in example sentences. So let's get started. Let's look at alternatively. This is used to suggest another possibility. You might say, we could go to the Chinese restaurant, or alternatively, we could try that new Indian place. So this is the first possibility and this is another possibility. Or in written English, in a way that offers a choice between two or more things. For example, global warming is a crisis that is having a very negative impact. Alternatively, if we change our politics, the future of the planet could be very positive. Here is the first choice and here is the second different choice. Now let's look at although. Although introduces a subordinate clause which contains a statement which contrasts with the statement in the main clause. So, for example, although the shooting has stopped for now, the destruction left behind is enormous. Here is the main clause, and here is the contrasting subordinate clause. Conversely, this means in an opposite way. For example, poor health is accepted as normal aging. Conversely, youth is seen as a time of good health. So this part of the sentence is contrasting in an opposite way to this part. Or, are there any parts of your story that you're particularly proud of? Or, conversely, anywhere you think it really didn't work. Again, we have contrast in an opposite way. This idea is opposite to this idea. Despite, which according to the dictionary means without taking any notice of, or being influenced by, or not prevented by. So let's see that in an example. I still enjoyed the week despite the weather. So here you're not prevented by the weather from having a good time. Or trains are still running despite the snow. So here the trains are not prevented from running by the snow. Now let's look at even so. Even so means although it is true. For example, the phone system has improved, but even so, there are still very few houses with phones. So although it is true that the phone system has improved, there are still very few houses with phones. By contrast, to show that you are mentioning a very different situation from the one you've just mentioned. For example, the public sector is lacking funds. The private sector, by contrast, has plenty of money to spend. So here we're showing that the private sector is in a very different situation to the public sector. Very similar, we have in contrast. The lives of girls in poor families can be very hard. In contrast, the lives of girls in well-to-do families are very often privileged. So here, by using in contrast, you're saying the lives of girls in either poor families or rich families is very different. And slightly different, we have in contrast to. So here you could say trains are often cancelled in the UK. In contrast to similar services in Switzerland, trains are always running. Here we are contrasting one train system in the UK and the train system in Switzerland, where the service is very different. To here is followed by a noun. Now let's look at nevertheless. You use nevertheless when saying something that contrasts with what has just been said. It's quite formal, so good for your writing. So for example, many marriages fail. Nevertheless, people continue to get married. So here we have a contrast, and despite the fact that many marriages are failing, the fact that many marriages are failing does not stop people getting married. So here you can see the contrast. Nonetheless. Nonetheless means the same as nevertheless. Again, it's quite formal, could be used in your writing. You use nonetheless when saying something that contrasts with what has just been said. For instance, his face is serious, but nonetheless very friendly. So although his face is very serious, it's still friendly. On the other hand, great phrase, really useful. You use on the other hand to introduce the second of two contrasting points or facts or ways of looking at something. For example, hospitals lose money, but on the other hand, if people are healthy, we are saving lives. So by using on the other hand, we are introducing the second contrasting point. Here, that if people are healthy, we are saving lives. On the contrary, you use on the contrary when you have just said or implied that something is not true and are going to say the opposite is true. For example, it wasn't a good thing. On the contrary, it was a huge mistake. In other words, it's quite the reverse. So it was quite the reverse of a good thing, a huge mistake. Now let's look at while. While is a great contrasting word that you can use in your writing and speaking. You use while at the beginning of a clause to introduce information which contrasts with the information in the main clause. So the first two services are free, while the third costs £20. So here the main clause is the first two services are free, and you introduce the contrast to that with while. The third is not free, it costs £20. Finally, whereas, like while, introduces a comment which contrasts with what is said in the main clause. So, for example, you could say pensions are linked to inflation, whereas they should be linked to the cost of living. Here we have the main clause, pensions are linked to inflation, then with whereas we introduce a contrast. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you feel more confident in comparing and contrasting ideas in both your writing and your speaking, and which linking words to use. Remember to like this video if you found it useful, share it with your friends and colleagues learning English, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss out on any new lessons that come out. Here you might find some lessons that interest you to improve your writing. So go ahead and check those out. Take care and see you very soon. Bye bye.